Hello and welcome to, well, not quite South Bend, but South Bend adjacent, where Kevin Noon and I are here. Have a lovely hotel room so that we don't have to sleep outdoors. Hotels in South Bend were about $sign Texas for this game. So we're just a little outside of South Bend, but we are here, spent the whole day at Notre Dame. Want to get you kind of a run through of what we saw today, what we're expecting for tomorrow, answer a bunch of your questions. So feel free to throw those questions in the chat for us. But Tony Gerdeman, by the way, on assignment this evening, so you will not no Tony, but that's okay. We will have all the fun and excitement you have come to expect from these Buckeye Weekly live shows. Kevin, I guess first of all, I think was this your first time at Notre Dame today?
It was my first time of any consequence. I drove through once when I was still a student at Ohio State, coming back from Chicago. I took a little side trip, and I don't really even think I parked, to be honest. So this is the first time I had an opportunity to walk around.
Your first impressions?
It's a nice little campus. You get used to the mega campus that's Ohio State, and just the size and the sheer number of students there, and that's not the feeling you get at Notre Dame. Much smaller. Still a lot of juice going on there, just with everything that was going on campus. A lot of opportunities for fans, both of Ohio State and of Notre Dame, to see some things around campus. It was a good opportunity, something we normally don't get to do in our travels because most of the venues been there, done that.
Yeah, this has a little bit of a different feel for whatever reason. And I've been to Notre Dame before. I've seen a game at Notre Dame before. It's been like 15 years, but yeah, this is one of those places where I don't remember if I had this conversation on the air with Tony or not, but it's like the first time you go to Wrigley Field, the first time you go to Fenway Park, it's like, wow, I've seen this on TV so many times, and it's like, oh, there it is, the Golden Dome, touchdown Jesus, Notre Dame Stadium. It's all the stuff you've seen it for so many times over so many years, and it's like, oh, there it is. I had the same sensation like you go to Paris, and it's like, oh, look, there's the Eiffel Tower. Like, yeah, you've seen it your whole life, and then there it is. Kind of cool.
Big Ben, Parliament.
Big Ben and Parliament, yes.
Can't get left.
We did not get stuck in any traffic circles, so that was a very good part of our day. You get to spend a lot of time walking around Notre Dame. We put up a ton of content. If you want to sort of get a little bit of a sense of the Notre Dame campus, we put up a ton of content on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. Videos of the library with the mural on the side should let you see it from a little bit of a different angle. Golden Dome, walking down the tunnel at Notre Dame Stadium where you can sort of see the Play Like a Champion Today sign and walk out on the field, kind of walk along with us. So a lot of that stuff. Tony and I did an hour and change of a morning show earlier in the afternoon, so you can find that on the channel as well. So lots of stuff. We had a busy day. We even got to have do a hungry huddle for the first time this season. Went to an iconic Notre Dame. I guess it's really kind of like a dive bar, which
it's an institution.
It is an institution. I say dive bar, and I say that with love because it's like I walked in, I was like, oh, this is my kind of place. Like I love that kind of place, and fantastic foods. You can watch that. The linebacker, you can find that on our channel as well. But let's take a little run through the game. I think this is going to be a very different perspective on things because Tony and I talked about this and spent an hour talking about it in the afternoon. But Tony and I are both picking very close games. You were not picking quite as close of a game. So I think you may have a little bit of a different perspective on where things may be breaking down in a bunch of different areas. So let's kind of just take a run through that. Ohio State with the ball. I think the biggest question for the Buckeyes is the offensive line. And if they lose the game, it happens because they can't run the ball. Kyle McCord is getting pressured, maybe makes a mistake because he's under pressure. It feels like that's kind of how, if it breaks down for Ohio State, that's how it breaks down for Ohio State. So why do you not necessarily view that as how that's going to all shake out?
Well, I'll ask you this. Was it a case of opposing teams truly stopping Ohio State, or was it more of a case of Ohio State stopping Ohio State? Was it Ohio State's own inability to execute certain things versus Ohio State going out there and putting out I don't even want to say it's best effort because you're not playing your best football in September, but going out and showing what it can show and just being stopped. I feel that Ohio State was stopping itself. We saw some growth. I mean, let's remember of the 63 points that Ohio State put up against Western, 2 touchdowns were on defense, and 28 of those points happened within a 8-minute window, and there were some defensive points in that point as well. One of the defensive touchdowns. But I don't think that it's a case of that teams are stopping Ohio State as much as Ohio State is stopping Ohio State.
And I think that's fair. What makes you think that Ohio State's not going to stop Ohio State on Saturday?
And we'll get to Mike's super chat here in a second. I don't. It's just a feel. It's just a feel. I mean, I feel that way, and I don't know. I mean, I think that people are ready to, at risk of being jumped after this show, and if I go to a B-Dubs and have a couple beers, at risk of that happening. I don't think that Notre Dame has played anybody this point to necessarily show that Notre Dame is necessarily this top 10 national lockdown defense. I understand that Notre Dame is number 1 in the nation in pass efficiency defense. Navy threw the ball 7 times.
Yeah.
Central Michigan, I think, was 10 of 20 throwing. I mean, really the only team that it's played with a passing offense was NC State. And I'm sorry, Brennan Armstrong is winning the longevity award. It's not that he's been a great quarterback. I mean, granted, UVA is not much of a football program where he transferred from. They're playing right now as we're doing this, tied 7-all with NC State. But I don't know, just the way I feel.
Yeah. Okay. So, and this is a nice transition to Mike's Super Chat. I want to get back to you making friends in South Bend earlier today. But Mike's Super Chat related there. Have you been watching the NC State Virginia game? How did Notre Dame give up 24 points to them? A lot of it came later in the game. North Carolina State only had, I think, 7 first half points, and Notre Dame had sort of pulled away. And I think North Carolina State, if I remember correctly, the sequence of the game scored kind of later. It was not like North Carolina State was driving the ball up and down the field. North Carolina State has issues at receiver. They had guys, they had multiple dropped passes that could have been bigger plays, which if you're Ohio State, I think you look at that and go, okay, the Ohio State receivers are probably not dropping all of those passes. The ball's probably a little more on the money from Kyle McCord than it is from Brennan Armstrong. Tony and I watched that whole game earlier in the week, and
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was a mood. The whole thing was one big mood, but it is, it's, you never know exactly. Notre Dame is, going in and probably not defending North Carolina State exactly the way they're going to be defending Ohio State. They didn't get, North Carolina State didn't do a whole heck of a lot on offense for long stretches of that game. And one of the drives where they did score, it was like 3 Notre Dame penalties. They had the personal foul, they had a hands to the face, and then they had something else. There were 3 defensive penalties in relatively short succession that moved the ball about 35 of the 50 yards that North Carolina State's needed at one point. So, yeah, I don't look at that and go, yeah, North Carolina State's terrible, and that means that Notre Dame's defense is secretly garbage. I look at that and say, yeah, North Carolina State's terrible. Ohio State's not playing North Carolina State tomorrow.
Well, NC State also is probably not a dual threat offense run pass. I mean, really what I've seen out of NC State is a no threat offense in a lot of ways. I mean, Brendan Armstrong can be slippery at some moments and get out there and run some, but it's not a team that's necessarily going to scare you with its run game. I mean, I think that there's a level of concern with any quarterback that is mobile, but Brennan Armstrong may be textbook mobile, but he's not laboratory mobile. Mm-hmm. In theory, you read the textbook and it says he is a mobile quarterback. You go to the lab and you see him, and he's not exactly the most mobile guy.
Yeah. And we have a quick super chat we want to get to here from Corey Flores. Said, "What's up, guys? Hope you guys had an amazing," and then didn't finish his thought, but I'm going to say day. I'm going to say visit to Notre Dame. All of these things, I would say the answer is yes. I have had a pretty fantastic day enjoying Notre Dame. It's one of those iconic spots that you have to enjoy when you're there. It was 24-17, as Mike Freno points out in the fourth, and after three it was 24-17 Notre Dame. But it was one of those games where also I don't know that North Carolina State ever felt like a North Carolina State was seriously threatening. They had.
I'm sure if you look at the win probability,
yeah,
it never really spiked.
Yeah, it was North Carolina State scored with 2:55 left in the third to cut it to 24-17, and then 11:38 left in the fourth. Notre Dame scores, and then they scored again a minute and 4 seconds later, and that was basically it. And all of a sudden, it's 38-17. So, yeah, it was just never it was not a great performance by North Carolina State by any means. Like I said, the first touchdown drive was the one where Notre Dame just handed them like 35 yards of penalties, and that one was 7 plays, 62 yards. So it was more than half, I believe, penalties or close to half penalties. And then the next drive, the scoring drive for North Carolina State, 5 plays, 33 yards. They kicked a field goal. The one drive at the end of the third was 7 plays, 75 yards, and then the last touchdown was in garbage time. So, yeah, I mean. Yeah, it wasn't a particularly great performance. How did Youngstown State score a touchdown on Ohio State? How did Indiana score a field goal on Ohio State? I watched the North Carolina State game and thought Notre Dame's offense looks crappy. It might be partly because it's a really bad weather game. I didn't look at that and say massive vulnerabilities in this Notre Dame defense.
But do you watch Notre Dame's offense and see an offense that can be explosive like USC, that can be explosive like Oregon, even Oklahoma, who Brent Venables must be really pissed off. Some people must owe him money or something because they're going out there with ruthless aggression and really taking it to people until the final seconds of games. I don't see that there. I don't see a stifling defense. Central Michigan, and I understand Central went against a bit of a depleted Notre Dame team, as Notre Dame knew it didn't need everybody, and you really can't fake a guy out of the concussion protocol with J.D. Bertrand and guys like that. So it was what it was, but I certainly hope that Ohio State's offense is at least 5% more powerful than Central Michigan's. Maybe not 5, maybe 500% more. I mean, it's so easy to get hung up on 63. Not all 63-point outbursts are the same, but I think that it was the closest thing that we have seen to life. And with recent years, I don't think any of us feel it was an anomaly. I think it just feels like it was finally a step forward, but we certainly know about 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. Let's take that second step forward on Saturday, and then you can take your 2 steps back on the open week. You'll still beat the open week, and then on to Rutgers, which is just kind of like a sacrificial lamb.
Yeah, this is going to be the benchmark game for Ohio State in the first half of the season. There's really no question about that. And this is a game where Ohio State is being doubted by a lot of folks. And it's, it feels kind of silly to say that when they are a road favorite against Notre Dame, but I kept having people texting me, everyone is picking Notre Dame in this game. Everyone is picking Notre Dame in this
Rick
game.
Neuheisel isn't.
Well, yeah,
there's one.
Yeah, Rick Neuheisel, but it was, every newspaper person or national columnist or ESPN personality. It wasn't literally everyone, but it was, enough to maybe get you on the honor roll, the percentage of people who are picking Notre Dame to beat Ohio State. And that's an unusual position for Ohio State. That's a spot that the Buckeyes have not been in much over the years, unless you're playing Alabama or Georgia or someone like that. And Notre Dame is a very good team. Notre Dame is not Alabama or Georgia or vintage Clemson or, when Notre Dame has run up against those teams, it has gone the exact same way every time. for largely the same reasons.
Let me jump in real quick before we get to Jeff's super chat. Who does Vince Vaughn as the guest picker pick?
Well, I think, boy, he has the tie. He's the guest picker because he has ties to Notre Dame through Rudy, but he is an Ohio State fan.
A well-documented
Yes.
Ohio State fan. It's not like he got caught in a T-shirt once. I mean, he is full-throated endorsement.
Yeah, I think he'll pick Ohio State. Is this one of the hilarious weeks when all of the ESPN experts pick one team and then the guest guy picks other team and is the one who is right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, those are definitely the funniest weeks for sure. Super chat from Jeff Straley. Awesome game coverage. Thank you, Jeff. The more people who pick against the Bucs, the better I feel. Stop the run, get an early lead, hit the quarterback, finish the game with Mayan and Chip. Does Hartman hold the ball too long and do the Bucs get to him? And that's an interesting question because Sam Hartman does hang on to the ball and try and let guys get open downfield. And that's great in a lot of ways. You're not panicking. You're giving your guys a chance to get open. It's harder to cover a guy if the quarterback's willing to stay in the pocket, hang on to it for 3.5, 4.5 seconds. That is real hard to cover a receiver for 4 seconds. Now, last week, the Ohio State pass rush had a lot of pressure but didn't get home. But they had a lot of pressure, and Austin Reed from Western Kentucky is getting the ball out in like 2 seconds. So if Austin Reed had been hanging on the ball for 4 seconds, he was going to be parallel on the ground quite a bit. Now, this is a better offensive line than Western Kentucky had, but if he is hanging on to the ball, there are going to be times when that makes a positive play for Notre Dame. Unquestionably, that will be, hey, a crosser came open, a back leaked out and out of the backfield, and you hit him, and then there's a bunch of yards after catch. Like, there will be a play like that. But there will also be a play where he gets just pasted by JT Tuimoloau or Mike Hall or Jack Sawyer or whoever it is. Yeah. And so that's, you take the good, you take the bad, as the old TV song goes.
Before we get to Mike's super chat, let me ask you a question here. I mean, Ohio State faced a Sunday quarterback in Austin Reed. Sam Hartman, after he finally gets his third doctorate in his 48 years of college, Dr. Hartman, I mean, he's certainly going to have an opportunity for the pros as well. So, we certainly don't see a drop off at quarterback, but when you look at Western Kentucky's receivers, you look at Malachi Corley, who had 1,300 receiving yards. You look at some of their other receivers. Then you look at Notre Dame, a team that admittedly plays receiver by committee. Is Ohio State going against better receivers last week than it is this week in terms of where they are in terms of their development? I have no doubt in my mind that Notre Dame's receivers are some dudes, but if you're not a dude yet, I mean, Ohio State isn't playing Notre Dame in 24 or 25, short of it being in an expanded playoff field.
Yeah, and Notre Dame has some very talented freshman wide receivers.
Rico Flores for one.
Yeah, Jaden Greathouse for another. I mean, those are very talented receivers. The freshmen. Ohio State has a talented freshman in Carnell Tate, who, I mean, I'm going to put my money on Carnell Tate in terms of who ends up getting drafted the highest of any of the, these three freshman wide receivers when all is said and done. But Carnell Tate's the fourth wide receiver for Ohio State. He's not being asked to carry the mail. Jaden Greathouse, 10 catches, 126 yards. They have not. Rico Flores, 6 catches, 93 yards. Those are two of the Greathouse, the second highest in terms of receptions for this year's Notre Dame team. And then Chris Tyree, 8 catches, 216 yards, 27 yards per catch. You look at that and it's like, wow, that's incredible. He must be the big play down the field guy. And a bunch of his yards against North Carolina State came on just a little dump off in the flat where a North Carolina State defender just completely lost him, and he turned, catches it for 2 yards downfield and turns it into a 50-yard gain.
Every yard counts, Tom.
Every
yard.
Do all count. Yes, they do all count. But that's not a stress you vertically kind of guy. Right. He's a 5'9", listed at 5'9" slot receiver, which means 5'8", 6'2" with the afro. Not the quintessential downfield big play target kind of guy. And one of their other big targets this year has been Holden Stays, who's a tight end. And that's the thing, there are things about this week that make me think, okay, Ohio State, questionable offensive line, young quarterback, going on the road, hostile environment. Like, there's reasons to pick Notre Dame in this game. But every time I start thinking that, I think, well, I've also watched the last 30 years of Notre Dame football, and they have consistently fallen short in the same areas. And when, they can be sometimes bad, sometimes okay, sometimes good. And then you get to the Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Clemson at certain points kind of level of the sport, and they hit their head on that glass ceiling because they just don't have the outside talent. They have a better quarterback now than they typically have had over the last 30 years. They still, I don't think, and maybe they'll prove me wrong, and maybe this will be the year that is the exception, I still don't see the really elite wide receiver talent that gets them over the hump in a game like this.
Really quick, just to give to Mike Farino's super chat. Thank you for the super chat. Interception by Armstrong, passed it right to Virginia. I saw it. I think he threw it in the red zone. I mean, it was just a really bad pass out to the left side, out to the out to the sideline. Just, not very good there. But I want to say this about Rico Flores, and this isn't to stir up controversy, but before Noah Rogers committed to Ohio State, Rico Flores was still a target for Ohio State. I think everybody believed that Flores, or that Noah Rogers was going to go to Ohio State. There were a lot of people, though, that wanted to say he's a bit of a homebody. I mean, he's from outside of Raleigh-Durham, that he was going to go to NC State. I think Ohio State, still kept kicking the tires. If Noah Rogers goes to NC State, is Rico Flores on Ohio State? We'll never know at this point. I mean, it's all speculation, but again, if Ohio State is really selecting receivers in a large part, not necessarily having to go out and recruit them. But I think that as long as Ohio State is able to limit big plays, and I think that moves a little bit more into the run game. I certainly saw Audric Estime take 175 yards because he got the edge and two defenders bounced off of each other, and then he was gone. If he gets into the second level, into the third level, while he's certainly not a 4-3 guy, I mean, he's got enough speed to be able to pull away from a lot of safeties and things of that nature. But he is the type of back that Ohio State traditionally, and what Ohio State did 8 years ago has no bearing on today, but Ohio State traditionally, i.e. Wisconsin, was able to shut down the Monty Balls and receiver, or the running backs of that ilk.
Yeah, Melvin Gordon, great college running back. He was on that Wisconsin team that lost 59-0 to Ohio State. Like, they have just historically, for the teams that are the big white dude offensive line, for lack of a more gentle term, we're Wisconsin. We're talking about Wisconsin and Iowa. Wisconsin and Iowa have typically not fared well against Ohio State. You have the one bizarre outlier where Brian Ferentz scores 55 points on an Urban Meyer team, which
what's a tight end?
Yeah, that one is still defies any sort of explanation. But typically Wisconsin hasn't beaten Ohio State since 2009, 2010, whatever the year that they ate. Maybe it was the year that Wisconsin returned the opening kickoff for a touchdown up in Madison.
Obvious hold, but not if it isn't called.
Anyway, that type of team, that type of back has just not overwhelmed Ohio State at any point really in the last decade. And what it does
outside of Derrick Henry, who Lane Kiffin decided to stop running.
Lane Kiffin took him out of that game. And other than that, they just had that type of back has not typically matched up well with Ohio State. And Audric Estime had what last year? 30-something yards?
20-something.
27 yards?
27.
Yeah.
He did have a touchdown from 1 yard out. I mean, and it took Notre Dame a couple of slugs to get it in.
Yeah, that has just – and last year's Ohio State defense was okay. But that's – Georgia put up 42 points on them. Notre Dame put up 10 points. Now, again, that's a Tyler Buckner. That's a new head coach being cautious. And, okay, it's not a perfect parallel. But other than Notre Dame fans being very excited about this year's team and looking at this year's team as senior laden defense, you've finally got a quarterback who might be that next level of quarterback you haven't had. What makes you think you've solved the broader issues of you don't have, your main back is not the burner who's probably going to go 80 yards. Your wide receivers are not the guys who are going to just pick apart a secondary for the, again, maybe this happens Saturday night and we look like idiots, but I feel like I kind of have to see Notre Dame do this against this level of competition before I believe it, because it has been a minute since Notre Dame has done this against this level of competition.
I mean, people will be quick to point out that Notre Dame did beat number 4 Clemson last year.
And then what happened?
And then Clemson kind of fell off the cliff. Did Notre Dame break Clemson, or was it a case of that Clemson was just propped up until it got to Notre Dame, and then it all fell apart? And while I know there are not many Ohio State fans that have a lot of love for Notre Dame, I think that most Ohio State fans were pulling for Notre Dame that night because of the obvious recent history with Clemson and all. But no, Notre Dame wins the games generally that it should, and the games that it shouldn't, it doesn't. And that's kind of how it goes.
Yeah, here is little old Clemson and what they had done before that Notre Dame game. They were undefeated. Congratulations. Beat Georgia Tech, who fired its coach, beat Furman, FCS team, beat Louisiana Tech, beat Wake Forest in double overtime, beat North Carolina State by 10.
That's Sam Hartman.
That is Sam Hartman. Beat Boston College, beat Florida State, which was not this year's Florida State team, by 6 points, beat Syracuse, which was not this year's Syracuse, by 6 points, and then lost to Notre Dame, then beat Louisville, beat Miami, lost to South Carolina, beat North Carolina, and then got thumped by Tennessee. I mean, that team's fine, but what did they end up in the polls? 15th, 18th? I mean, something like that. It just, that's fine. Last year's Clemson team is not Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State level. Like, there's a reason we talk about a certain era of Clemson team. That era is not last year. This year's Ohio State team might not be at that level. I think we're going to find out tomorrow. Because if they go into South Bend and they lose by a couple touchdowns, like, okay, now expectations have come way down, and you're not in that conversation. I'm picking again. I'm predicting a very close game. I do not think this is an Ohio State team that is going to get blown out. I do not really think this is a Notre Dame team that's going to get blown out. I think that's a Notre Dame team that is better. I think it's a Notre Dame team that's closed the gap. I just don't know if they've closed it all the way.
Well, and touchdown NC State on the ground the final 30 seconds of the half. But again, it's on the ground, not Brennan Armstrong doing anything. He did have a couple nice passes over the middle. I went round and round, and it's well documented that I kind of have run my mouth through the last couple of months about this game, and the odds makers seem to have some good feelings in the futures bets and had the line a little over a touchdown, and now we're down to 3.5, depending on which minute it is for the game to try and determine where the line is, and you go from there, but. Again, are these teams talent equated from 1 to 22? I'm not even going to say 1 to 85. Mm-hmm. 1 to 85, no chance. They're not talent equated. I'm sorry. I will be nowhere near the stadium tomorrow, so please don't come up to me and attack me. But they're not talent equated. 1 to 22. I'm asking you, are they talent equated?
Yeah. Well, I'm pulling up the 247 talent composite right now, and that is 1 to 85. Buckeyes number 3. It is Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, and then Notre Dame is 11th. And there is a Notre Dame fan in the comments right now who keeps saying, "Did Ohio State beat Michigan last year?" Which, no. The answer is no. They didn't beat them the year before that either. Has Notre Dame beaten Ohio State in the last 85 years? Also, no.
I mean, they beat them in 1936,
1935, and 1936. Yes. But what is your favorite major bowl win for Notre Dame over the last 30 years?
I don't know, maybe some Bluebonnet Bowl.
Yeah. So if we're defining major bowl as major bowl and not as
Is that like Major Dad?
sponsored by a margarine company, yeah. I mean, there is a reason that Notre Dame has consistently bumped its head on the certain level of the sport. It is. I was in high school, and not like a senior in high school, the last time Notre Dame won a major bowl game, and that was after the 1993 season. They beat Texas A&M in, I think, the Fiesta Bowl, but it has been like literally 30 seasons ago. That was what happened. So, and since then, they keep going to these games, and it's just, Ohio State pantses them twice in the Fiesta Bowl. They get absolutely blown out of the stadium by Notre Dame. They get blown out of the stadium by Clemson.
Blew them out of the stadium.
You
said they got blown out of the stadium by Notre Dame.
No, sorry, they got blown out of the stadium by Clemson, Georgia, Alabama. They got blown out of the stadium in the national championship game. They got blown out of the stadium by Oregon State in a Fiesta Bowl at one point. And yes, all of those are different teams from this year's team. Absolutely. Can you point me to the counterfactual that shows, okay, this has happened in the past? Like, what are you pointing to? I know that everyone is hopeful that this year is different, and it may end up being different, but this is the time before the game when every year Notre Dame fans are telling you it's different. Like, just search, in quotes, return to glory, and pick a Notre Dame head coach in the past. Return to glory, Tyrone Willingham. Return to glory, Charlie Weiss. Return to glory, Bob Davie. It's all there. It's all there. This is the return to glory Marcus Freeman week. Is it going to be a true return to glory? We'll find out.
Well, one of these days, Lucy's going to let Charlie Brown kick that football. She's not going to pull it away.
I mean, at some point, it is going to happen. I don't understand the idea that you are just like weapons grade stupid if you think that this is not the year. Like, why would? Yes, it is possible this is the year. Yes, there are reasons that this Notre Dame team is. I mean, let's put it this way: if this year's Notre Dame team doesn't do it with Sam Hartman at quarterback, with 10 of 11 starters being seniors or grad students, I have bad news about next year, friends. Like that. Next year ain't going to be it for Notre Dame.
I mean, if they thought that Stephen Jelly was ready, they wouldn't have needed to go out and get Sam Hartman. So, I mean, I think they're going to be in a perpetual portal cycle or something. But your belief, I mean, what kind of the things you're saying leads into Mike Farino's super chat. I read that almost 70% of the money has come in on Notre Dame. The line has fallen or is held to a firm -3. You think it would move more to Indy with that much money?
Yeah, and I'm going to pull up a tweet from Mark Givler from Buckeye Huddle because he was talking about.
I know that guy.
Well. I do as well. He tweeted about this earlier, and he said something. Tweet less.
He said words.
He said, it's very interesting. I've had ESPN today as background noise, and almost every person throughout the day has picked Notre Dame. Apparently, roughly 3/4 of the bets are on Notre Dame, yet the OSU line on DraftKings just moved from -3 to -3.5. Vegas is digging its heels in on this one. Typically I don't think that's Vegas proving a point. That's Mark being a little colorful there. But that typically tells me there are big money people, sharps is what they're called, people who do this professionally who are putting money on Ohio State. So all the people who are in your timeline telling you they put $20 down on Notre Dame +3.5 or +3.
I got 4 units on them.
Yeah, units, 50 cents each. There takes a whole bunch of those people to equal a guy who's putting $5,000-$10,000 on the game, who's doing it professionally. Typically, in the past, and I'm not making, this is just broad generalization. Typically, in the past, when the public is very, very heavy on a team and the line doesn't move, usually the public loses a lot of people lose those $25 bets. Typically, not always, but a lot of times there's something in the numbers that are not necessarily the public numbers, but the people who are doing this professionally who have, more. sometimes better information, but sometimes just better data, a lot of times those folks end up being on the correct side of it. And this is a game that we're talking about, potentially a very close game, and it is an oblong ball that sometimes takes weird bounces. And if it's a close game, one bounce, one ball that hits a guy on the punt return team in the heel and turns the whole game. I mean, you've seen football games swing on crazy stuff, but that's the kind of thing that makes me think, well, somebody knows something.
They do, and you don't know until you know, and we'll kind of have to go from there. But all these books aren't built on charity. All these casinos aren't built on goodwill. I mean, Vegas is in this to make money. These books, now that sports betting is across the nation, and you can't turn on the TV without 7 different Kevin Hart commercials telling you to deposit money into one of the betting services. I just looked up, and strangely enough, neither of the games have a betting commercial on, and we are in Indiana where you can bet. But yeah, I mean, you would think
we're not going to talk about what the commercial is that's on right now.
No, it's something about underwear, and that's all I'm going to say. And I lost my train of thought a little bit there, but I mean, it'll be interesting tomorrow. There's an account I follow. I think the guy's name is Ben Fox, but it's not Fox. It's like FA. It's like Guy Fawkes or whatever, and he tracks a lot of the big bets. And I expect to see some big money bets come in on Ohio State at the end, and because the sharps generally don't come in until like the last 24 hours. A lot of times it's not until like the last 12 hours. So we could sit there and say, well, the line is at this and the line is at that. I mean, the only thing that we really know right now is that this is an expensive ticket.
Oh yeah, it's a very expensive ticket. I have a very standard set of advice for people on buying tickets. And I always say, outside of a complete outlier game, you're always better off waiting until the last possible minute. Wait until, if you are the kind of person who is okay with standing outside the football stadium with 5 minutes to go before kickoff and not necessarily having tickets, then you will probably get the best price.
I can't be that guy. I'm too neurotic for that.
Nerves of steel, baby. This is the exception to the rule. This game, I saw something where ticket prices have gone up 35% over the last 24 hours. That does not happen. It is the way the ticket market usually works is everyone goes in with their pie in the sky number that when they're selling their tickets, and okay, I'm going to sell my tickets for Ohio State and Youngstown State for $300. And then, okay, 2 weeks before the game, all right, I'm going to lower that to $150. And then a week before the game, okay, they still haven't sold. Okay, now I'm going to sell them for $75. And then when you're a day before the game, you go, oh crap, I don't want to get stuck with these. I'm going to sell them for $40. And then if you still have them 15 minutes before kickoff, you're saying $20, please take them. I am begging you, please take them. This year, with this game, ticket prices started high. They slowly started coming down. And then I think a lot of people were about to the point where they were going to get in the car and just said, I'm going to buy tickets and I'm going to just have them before I get in the car. And so now everything at the lower price points is gone. And now the get-in price is like $685 again.
Was it that, or I thought I read that it was in the 8s.
Oh, is it up to the 8s now?
I thought it was in the 8s. I knew a lot of people that I was talking to. I'm getting blown up on my text messages right now. A friend wants to go out drinking, so he'll have to wait. That a lot of people I know were saying that they've gone out and spent $500, $550. Oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm doing this. Well, their decision, they're going to feel either good about or bad about it based on the outcome of the game, obviously. But from their wallet standpoint, they made a good decision because those tickets now probably would be in the 7s or 8s. Because, again, a lot of there's not really an upper tank at Notre Dame the way that the stadium is set up. But your upper rows, a lot of those seats have come off the board at this point. But there was another tweet that we saw from Joey Kaufman of the Columbus Dispatch.
Yeah. I was just going to pull that one up.
Yeah, just pull that one up because I do not want to misquote it. But that one was very interesting as well in terms of what the blend was going to be between Ohio State and Notre Dame fans.
Yeah, we Tony and I were talking in the afternoon, and he guessed 10% Ohio State fans. I said maybe more like 20, but I think it's going to be difficult for Ohio State fans to get tickets. According to Joey Kaufman, he says, according to a projection from Vivid Seats, the crowd at Notre Dame Stadium on Saturday will be 40% Ohio State fans. Now, I don't know exactly how that works. Ohio State gets a ticket allotment. 40% sounds crazy high to me. Crazy high. Ohio State gets a ticket allotment of probably 5,000 tickets, give or take. And the capacity of Notre Dame Stadium is like 80,000, something like that.
It's shy of 80. It's in the upper 70s.
Yeah. So let's just say 80,000 just for nice round numbers. So Ohio State has 6,000 tickets, something like that. For Ohio State to have 40% of 80,000 tickets, that's 32,000 tickets.
Which means I've gotten 27,000 on the secondary market because you're going to get 5,000.
Yeah.
If the band travels, that comes out of your 5,000.
Correct. Yeah.
Parents, administrators that go, and then your rich donors. So the public is never going to sniff that 5,000 allotment.
That 40% sounds crazy high. I'm willing to think 25, maybe 30. I
thought 70-30 was the stretch goal, but I thought I thought it was reachable, but I thought it was a bit of a stretch goal.
And this is a game where Ohio State fans, there are always, every time they do one of those like fill in the blank nation kind of surveys, Ohio State is always number one with a bullet in terms of who has the most fans nationally. It's always Ohio State, and it's like 11 million or whatever the number is. Notre Dame's like 3 or 4 on that list. And so it's not like this is Ohio State and TCU, and Ohio State's going down and playing at Jerry World against TCU, and there are just barely 100,000 living TCU alumni, and not that many sidewalk fans because there's so many other fans in Texas. So Ohio State goes into Jerry World and just based on sheer numbers, overwhelms TCU, who's playing 45 minutes from its campus, because there are so many more Ohio State. That's not the case. There are a huge number of Notre Dame fans. I mean, we'll see, and maybe I'm wrong, but that would surprise me if it was that close to 50-50.
If somebody offered you $7 per ticket, and we know that you can go out and get an LG OLED TV or whatever for all of that and be able to have some fine watching at home for years to come and everything else. I was talking with some writers just on Wednesday at OSU. It's like, I would never spend $500 for, a ticket to about anything. I'm like, well, probably not. And I could come up with some fanciful ideas, but this is a kid-friendly show. But I think everybody's got a price to a certain extent. And it's always funny because you go on message boards, and we have a great one at Buckeye Huddle, and I recommend anybody who's not a member to check us out. But you go on to message boards, and you get the really pious people who are really good at spending other people's money, who are like, you should take those tickets and burn them before you give them to a visiting fan. Nobody knows anybody else's situation. Times are tough, and I think that if I had, if I was sitting on 4 tickets and I was offered $750 a piece, I'd be like, oh, I could get 3 large, for all of that. That would solve some problems. That would go a long way for paying for that new air conditioner.
Yeah, and I think the issue is also there's probably a Notre Dame fan somewhere who is willing to pay that much as well. So,
but you have a ton of Ohio State fans who are nipping at your heels for them or whatever, and it's a lot easier. And if you get worn down, I think that's going to be the case rather than going on to some sort of ticket exchange or whatever, especially maybe something that that there's a little bit of juice taken out of it. If you're going through there, I would rather just transfer it directly to somebody and just be like, go with God.
Yeah. Mike Farino says, if I recall correctly, Georgia had roughly 30 to 35% in 2017. It's a much easier trip from Columbus. Yeah, absolutely. And
Chicago, there's such a huge fan base in Chicago and everything else.
What was 2017 Notre Dame football like? This is a team that has a lot of juice right now. The Notre Dame program has a lot of people excited. Yeah, that was week 2, and they had just beaten Temple week 1, which is a huge win, obviously. But they were coming off a 4-8 season a year before that. So you're coming off a 4-8 season. You can return to glory all you want. There are going to be some show me folks at that point. So that was probably an easier ticket to get. I'm going to guess the get-in price was not $800 for that game.
Well, and I think too, 2017 Georgia was not 2021, 2022 Georgia, where everybody's come out of the woodwork and expects to win. Mm-hmm. And I think that, it is a different set of circumstances right now. And I think that there's probably more Ohio State enthusiasm. There's certainly more Notre Dame enthusiasm. Hey, we have a quarterback, Tyler Buckner and Tommy Rees are in Tuscaloosa mucking up the place down there. I mean, we've got, we've got a shot here. This is, this, that, and the other, the last year of this current playoff structure, everything else that's going on. So there's a lot of reasons for Notre Dame fans maybe not to move their tickets, but Ohio State, the only place I've really seen Ohio State get largely shut out, and I use that term loosely, is Penn State. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's almost to the point of where when in the NHL, the Nashville Predators won't sell tickets to people from certain zip codes that are in Illinois or whatever to keep to keep the mass that are the Chicago Blackhawks when they're good from, their fans from descending down there. But, other than that, it's, it just kind of happens. And we've seen major takeovers at other places. And this is going to be one where it's going to be easy to see the contrast between green and scarlet.
It's weird that the NHL would be unwilling to rig a ticket lottery for the Blackhawks, when we've also seen in the past. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We don't need to finish that thought. It's fine.
Tom, give me your phone so I can check out some of your photos.
It's fine. It's fine. We don't need to do that. We're done with hockey talk now. This would not be the first time that a team in red had taken over Notre Dame Stadium. And Mike's point about 2017 Georgia was a huge amount of Georgia fans. I remember, I don't know if it was 2000, give or take, Nebraska, when Nebraska was still at the height of its powers. They came in, and it was, I remember looking on TV and saying, it looks like it's about 50% Nebraska fans. And Nebraska fans, they travel, they might travel better than Ohio State fans, at least, when adjusting for results. They might travel better than Ohio State fans, but it has happened. That's going to be a really interesting thing to watch tomorrow night, among other things.
Quick super chat from Mike Farino, adding another note for context. 2021 Cincinnati was also north of 30%. I mean, that was white hot Cincinnati at that point. That was the height of it all. And there certainly are instances. So, maybe 30% isn't as much of a reach goal, but you sit there and you wonder. I have a couple buddies who work in the ticket resale game, and I really need to talk to them if there's like a multiple service, like in terms of like real estate in the ticket resale, to where Vivid Seats has access to all of these numbers of the resale markets, of how that works out, if that's something that is shared industry wide, or how you get to that with so many different options in terms of ticket resale, even things that sometimes don't necessarily go through a brokerage.
Here's a good question.
Good, because I can't see my keyboard from here.
Here's a good question. A voice in the choir says, "Is there a chance Iowa will upset Penn State tomorrow?"
The weather's supposed to be bad, which favors Iowa and defense in some regards, but that bad weather is also going to make the difficult task of Iowa scoring points closer to impossible.
Yeah, that feels like that just drags a 31-13 Penn State win down to a 21-3 Penn State win. Something like that.
I mean, if they can intercept Drew Allar a couple of times and force a fumble and really muck it up, just really muck it up. But Iowa magic happens at Kinnick.
Yes. Yes, and whiteout magic happens at Penn State when they're not playing Ohio
Well,
State.
when they're not playing Ohio State,
Right,
because
yeah.
that's one of the fallacies that Penn State is some sort of unstoppable juggernaut. They're actually sub 500 in recognized whiteout games because so many of them have been against Ohio State.
Right. Yeah, and that's a talent issue that pom poms can only do so much. Is I think the thing there. And just kind of looking it through. Lots of talk about hotel toothbrushes in the chat because you guys are the best, and I love where the conversation goes. Ryan Dawes wants to know the sleeping situation on the cot of shame. I'm sitting on the cot of shame. It is a fold out of shame this week because Tony lucked into a win during bold predictions last week, and I missed my 3-pointer by 1 first down for Ohio State. Am I bitter? No, absolutely not. And I will thank you to stop asking.
I wish Tony wasn't on assignment right now so he could defend himself.
Yes. Oh, hey, Tony appears to be watching. He says lucked. Yes, that is a verb. Just to help clarify, it is a verb that indicates that it was fortune which led you to this outcome rather than skill or deservedness. So
fortune favors the bold.
Hopefully that helps. We will not be reading any further questions or comments from Tony Gerderman unless they come in the form of super chats.
I was going to say I could put them in a 5-minute timeout.
Yeah, please do, by all means. I think Roger says, I think the Buckeyes show up because they remember how they felt after Georgia lost, and that's why the Buckeyes win this game. Ryan Day said on his radio show they're going to come out swinging. And the Ryan Day you saw against Georgia was not the Ryan Day you saw against Michigan. Ryan Day against Michigan seems a little cautious, a little, well, maybe they've done enough. Maybe they're okay.
Please, sir, can I have some more?
And the Ryan Day against Georgia was, I'm going to take the doors off my Jeep and we're going to go bounce down this back road and I'm not going to hit the brakes and we're going to see what happens. And it darn near worked. And, Georgia, we have seen Georgia and Michigan go head to head, and Georgia is a better team than Michigan is. And so if he does not have CJ Stroud, he does not have Paris Johnson at left tackle. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that's not the same. So just saying YOLO does not necessarily lead to the same kind of productivity that you had against Georgia. But if Ohio State gets ahead, if Ohio State is going to win this game by 14 to 17 points, let's say, the way that happens in my mind is Ohio State gets out ahead, makes Notre Dame one-dimensional. Estime either gets kind of pulled out of the game in terms of just by necessity or just is ineffective. Notre Dame gets one-dimensional. The wideouts are not that great. Ohio State can, defensive line either gets sacks, gets hands up, tips a pass, get an interception. Like that's where it starts to snowball on Notre Dame. It's not what I'm predicting, but you could see that as a possible outcome. And that is maybe more in line with what you're potentially seeing.
Right. I think that Ohio State, their focus going into the year defensively was to take away the run. Mm-hmm. So if you take away Audric Estime, you take away Jadarian Price, you take away the rest of the running backs. I mean, Sam Hartman has a couple of rushing touchdowns, but he's not going to get out there and run around. He's not JJ McCarthy in terms of his ability to get out of the pocket and run around. But if you get that and you get it to a point and your corners are holding up pretty well, and Notre Dame has to turn into a team that's going to have to throw the ball 46, 47 times, what are your thoughts on how the game is going at that point? What is the Sunday headline at that point if that's what's happening there? And then if you're doing that and then the offense can feed off of it. I mean, the good news for Ohio State is if this defense is real, and again, they played an FCS team, a lower tier Big Ten team, and a Group of 5 team. But if this defense is real, if this defense is 20% better than the defense last year, I mean, I really like Ohio State's chances. And the thing is that if we're believing in a lot of points that people are saying, the winning team is going to have 24, 27 points, and it's going to be close. I mean, if I'm saying that Notre Dame is going to have 17 and you're saying Notre Dame's going to have 23 or whatever, we're only 6 points off. The only difference is I think that Ohio State is going to be a little bit more successful on offense.
Now, while we're on your prediction for the game, you have been making friends all around South Bend all day long.
How to make friends and influence people.
So let's start with the first time you were in a restaurant today. We went to the Linebacker Inn / Linebacker Lounge, depending on which portion of their sign you want to read and trust as your primary source there.
Yelp says it's the lounge.
Okay, well, what does Yelp know? Anyway, how do you read, Kevin? Top to bottom, left to right. Come on. So
not if I'm reading manga.
Anyway, let's keep this on track. Anyway, so they have one of those jukeboxes in
Touch Tunes,
which I apparently have not been in a bar recently and or thought about jukeboxes for a long time, because Kevin says, wouldn't it be funny to play Hang On Sloopy on the jukebox in this extremely, like, the most Notre Dame bar? And I'm thinking, like, yeah, that would be kind of funny, but also, number one, I don't want to get stabbed in the face, and number two, they're not going to have Hang On Sloopy, and of course, they don't have literal CDs in these things anymore. It's just because there's like iPods, and that was like 20 years ago. Anyway, so I'm old. So the point is, Kevin plays Hang On Sloopy because Kevin wants to live dangerously, and the reaction was absolutely nothing. It was one of the most disappointing moments in the last 6 months of my life.
Sad trombone.
But then Kevin and Tony were out. I was busy working. They were goofing off at some restaurant, and they you had someone approach you.
Yes, we were just minding our own business, just working. I was cutting Hungry Huddle, where you can see the things that I talked about there in terms of the Hang On Sloopy and the Sad Trombone, where we really didn't get a whole lot of response there. And it's like some guy comes up and is like, "Hey, you're that guy that said that Notre Dame was a bunch of nobodies." I'm like, well, I think I've been taken a little bit out of context here. What I'm saying is that I don't know who a lot of their players are. And what I didn't get to say at that point was that I follow recruiting. So if I don't know who a lot of these players are, there's some questions there for me. So, we go and we debate a little bit, but it was all good natured. And of course, I didn't want to get shanked in the face or whatever the term that Tom has been using, because, apparently he thinks this is Oz or something, but, we parted on good terms. And I don't know what he said as he turned the corner, but yeah, I'm infamous.
I'm just combining in my head the comment, all the comments about the hotel toothbrushes in the comments here, and thinking about sharpened hotel toothbrushes and Kevin now sleeping with one eye open tonight because he's angered the Notre Dame faithful. So that's a question from Jeff Straley. What conference are the refs from? I do not know the answer to that question. Typically, it's the visiting conference. So
no, it should probably be Big Ten. But sometimes you end up with a situation of where you get referees from one conference and replay from another, and so I'm not exactly sure on this one.
Yeah, Wingman Ted wants to know if you see the debut of Lorenzo Styles Jr. just to get some good smack talk on the field. I would think. Lorenzo Styles Jr. has been on kick coverage. You see him out there on kick coverage, wearing number 4.
I saw him get off the bus today. So
yeah, he's here. Yeah, obviously he's here. But yeah, I'm not expecting to see him on defense. He played wide receiver for Notre Dame literally last year, and he moved over to corner like a week before he left. So he's probably not quite up to speed in terms of technique and all that kind of stuff. There are a bunch of interesting storylines on that front. Lorenzo Styles just transferred from Notre Dame to Ohio State. Javonte Jean-Baptiste transferred from Ohio State to Notre Dame. He's now one of their starting defensive ends. James Laurinaitis went from Notre Dame to Ohio State. He's now a GA for the linebackers. Al Washington went from Ohio State to Notre Dame. He's now their defensive line coach. There's a lot of kind of cross-pollination going on here between these two programs. And so for teams that really don't play very often, there's a lot of really interesting storylines. And that doesn't even get into, hey, where'd Marcus Freeman go to college?
Well, at least he stopped, denigrating his Ohio State degree at this point. one time, was misspeaking. A second time, really kind of, got some people up in arms. All right, Ohio State fans were up in arms the first time. Well, I recognize that, but there are a lot of there's a lot of cross pollination there. But we can get into the whole situation, and as we're drawing toward the hour mark on the show, I don't want to get us on a downhill thing about this, but I think that the Big Ten really needs to take a view of how it's going to handle Notre Dame moving forward in terms of its members scheduling Notre Dame. If we've got a couple of super chats now with Estime, and then Treasure the Torah jumped in, so I want to definitely hit these. Do you keep scheduling Notre Dame if they keep denying your overtures of getting them into the conference, and the ACC goes and adds 3 teams for bargain basement prices with SMU and Cal and Stanford? But I think that there's a point that the Big Ten has to band together, and it's like, look, this is our last best offer. You're either in or you're out.
Well, if you want to keep Notre Dame, if you want to bring Notre Dame to the bargaining table in a position where they have to make a decision, that hinges around playoff access. Because right now, Notre Dame has a seat at the table. The Big Ten has a seat at the college football playoff meetings. The SEC has one. The ACC has one. And like all the conferences do. And Notre Dame has one. Notre Dame by itself, not like representing all of the. Notre Dame has a seat at the table, which, when you look at Notre Dame's playoff history, it's like, that's fun. That's a whole mood. If at some point, if the SEC and the Big Ten really want to, if you're getting to the point where you're having the 2-team super conference conversation, which is where the Notre Dame kind of, you have 2 decisions and one of them is to get off the pot. Like when that conversation happens, that's the 2-team super conference, point. If Notre Dame no longer has playoff access or clear playoff access, that's the point where that decision maybe changes. Ohio State not scheduling Notre Dame is not necessarily going to drive that.
It's not Ohio State not scheduling them. It's Ohio State. It's Michigan. It's Purdue. It's Michigan State. It's USC. I think you continue all of that.
Yeah.
You shouldn't allow Notre Dame to continue to have games within its footprint against teams that it just doesn't make any sense. You've got to freeze them out. But I digress. That's for another. We've got an open week coming up after this, so I'm sure that we'll end up on one of our shows at some point. So I don't want to get there. We're falling behind on super chats.
Yes, I can hear the people in the comments sharpening their toothbrushes right now. Mike Farino says Estime has had fumble issues at times in his career, and if it is a close game, that is a game that is going to be swung by the one big play, the one big mistake. If it's a fumble, if it's an interception. That we were saying earlier, this doesn't feel like a game where Ohio State is facing a guy who is likely to run for 150 yards. Like if Estime runs for 75 yards, that's probably good for Notre Dame. I don't think he's getting over 120 or anything like that. And then we need to get up to the super chat from Treasure the Torah. What's up, Kevin? What's up, Tom? Hope you are really enjoying your time in Notre Dame. We are. I have a feeling the game is going to go superbly awesome. Enjoy your night. Your brother, Treasure the Torah. Go Buckeyes. We appreciate you joining us and your support as always.
Treasure, when you're out in Columbus next time, because I know that we had dinner over at Rusty Bucket. One of the times you were in town, we weren't able to connect the other time that you were in town last season, but we've got to make it happen. I will drag Tom and Tony along as well. We can do better than Rusty Bucket at Easton, though. We'll find something. I promise. You flew into Cleveland last time, which was a little confusing at that point. Fly into Columbus, my friend. Fly into Columbus.
So yeah, well, and we are. If you are a member of Buckeye Huddle, I think the plan is there's going to be a tailgate tomorrow. We're probably going to make an appearance at a tailgate.
Well, I have a buddy who's having a tailgate. Okay. Now I can't have 500 people descend on it or whatever, but yeah, loose lips sink ships. Okay. But yeah, there is a tailgate.
Fortunately, we're not live, so it's fine.
Yeah, all right. But if you're a member, reach out to me through direct messages on the site. That's the best way to get me. I will make sure, it's not like we're going to be there at 8 a.m. It's not like the tailgate's going to be running at 8 a.m. So you have some time to reach me, and I will try to guide you in, but I won't know really until last second exactly where it is. So look for us somewhere around the Joyce Center, though.
All right. So that's Saturday. We're going to wrap up now. We're over an hour, I think. So we're going to.
We're contractually obligated for an hour, and we hit it.
We hit it. We hit the magic number. If this was not enough Ohio State Notre Dame talk for you, well, great news. Tony and I also did an hour earlier today. That was a much more scenic location right in front of the Hesburgh Library at Notre Dame. Very, very pretty spot. You may know it for a mural of Jesus on the front, looking like he's signaling for a touchdown. Rather iconic spot on the Notre Dame campus. So you can find that and a bunch of other stuff that we shot over at Notre Dame today on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. If you're watching this, good news, you're already there. So you can make sure you check out all those videos. We did, hit a couple of the sort of well-known spots, the Golden Dome, the Touchdown Jesus mural, did a little bit of extra content on those. Went and shot a bunch of stuff with the Notre Dame band. They do a bunch of stuff on Friday afternoons where they have a drum circle and they have trumpets play, the fight song and that kind of stuff. And they have kind of like their own version of a mini Friday skull session kind of thing, to try and put it in Ohio State terms, where they do it outside the main building on campus, which is the one with the Golden Dome. So you get to watch a bunch of that stuff if you want a little sort of flavor of Notre Dame's campus. Also did a kind of behind the scenes video of going down the tunnel at Notre Dame Stadium, taking you in there and seeing, you can see down a hallway where they have the Play Like a Champion Today sign that they slap, walking out on the field there, all that kind of stuff. Give a little inside look around at Notre Dame Stadium. You can find that on our YouTube channel as well. We did a bunch of stuff on Friday. Guess what? We're going to do a bunch of stuff on Saturday too. We'll be back over there. College Game Day will be there. We'll probably do a little something from there, but plenty of stuff of kind of give you a little bit of a tour of campus, walk around, give you a little sense for what a college game day is like on the campus of Notre Dame. Should be a really fun day. And then all that leads you up to the actual game. The game kicks at 7. We will have our usual post-game coverage as well. So you make sure you are subscribed to our YouTube channel. We are so close to 15,000 subscribers. It would be fantastic if we hit 15,000 subscribers before the game kicked off on Saturday night. And then after the game, you can find our usual post-game coverage, interviews with players and coaches, live coverage, reaction, all that kind of stuff, all at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. And of course, you can also find all of this stuff as podcasts as well on whatever podcast platform you like. Just search Buckeye Huddle. You can find it all there. That will do it for us right now. Thank you guys all for joining us. We will see you again on Saturday at Notre Dame.